Hi everybody, and thanks so much for joining tonight. My name's Eilidh. I'm a conservation filmmaker from Scotland, and I've been asked to chat to you about my latest film, Voices on the Road.
Manu es el sueño hecho realidad. No solo a nivel nacional, a nivel internacional, el Manu es, ¿cómo decirte?, la joya de la corona del sistema de áreas naturales protegidas del Perú.
Manu is a remote region of the Peruvian Amazon and one of the world's richest ecosystems. The indigenous communities of Shintuya, Shipitieri and Diamante lie between two protected areas of the rainforest. However, the government has been building a road into Manu since the 1950s, connecting these rainforest communities to the outside world. Each community has a different relationship with this road and how it will shape their future. I'm absolutely delighted to be part of this talking series, and the other talks have definitely made my lockdown wanderlust even worse than it was before. So hopefully tonight I'll be able to transport you to the rainforest region of the Manu Biosphere Reserve. So Manu is the location of our documentary. It's a rainforest region in southeastern Peru, and it's about 8 hours from the nearest city, Cusco, by bus on an unpaved road. Within the Manu Biosphere Reserve, there are two protected areas. The first one is the Manu National Park, and technically speaking, this is strictly protected. You need a permit and you need to go through passport control in order to enter, and it's also monitored by park guards. The second area is the Amarakairi Communal Reserve, and this is co-owned by 10 different indigenous communities. The Amarakairi Communal Reserve has much less protection than the Manu National Park does. But the Manu Biosphere Reserve in total is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's home to endemic species found nowhere else on Earth, and it's also home to a number of indigenous communities, including some who live in voluntary isolation with absolutely no contact with the outside world. Manu is also the world's top biodiversity hotspot, so it's a pretty special place. But unfortunately, despite this protected status, Manu is also facing a number of threats, from deforestation to slash and burn agriculture and increasingly gold mining. And this image here shows an area of gold mining which only a few years ago was pristine, thick, untouched rainforest. Cocaine trafficking is also a growing threat in Manu, and this image is a screenshot from a news bulletin taken only a few months before we arrived in Manu, showing cocaine trafficking happening just a couple of kilometres away from where our expedition was going to take place. To top it off, a new road is also being built through the heart of the Manu Biosphere Reserve. It's cutting alongside the Manu National Park and the Amarakairi Communal Reserve. It was also planned to be built through Diamante Native community, who until then had no access to the outside world by road. This road is predicted to cause a further 40,000 hectares of deforestation in Manu by 2040. And to put 40,000 hectares of deforestation into perspective, that's the combined size of Edinburgh and Glasgow. So it's pretty huge. So this road has quite a long and controversial history. It started to be built in 2015 by the regional government, but the construction was actually illegal because the government hadn't sought environmental approval. And so shortly after the building began, the central government stopped the construction and the regional governor was sued. This then sparked a 3-year-long battle between environmentalists and pro-road campaigners. And interestingly, part of the sort of pro-road campaign was in fact Diamante native community. So this totally went against our team's preconceptions of what an Indigenous community might want for their home. And this sort of formed the central question of our expedition. So why would an Indigenous community risk their paradise home by opening it up to the outside world? And so in November 2018, our team, with the support of the Scientific Exploration Society, set out to Manu to try and answer this question. So here we are in the best tree I've ever seen in my life. We have Jenny, who's a Peruvian biologist from Cusco, Bethan, who's an environmental journalist from Wales, and myself, a filmmaker from Scotland. And by this point, we'd all been working in Manu for quite a few years, and for all of us, it was an extremely important place. And during our time working in Manu, we'd heard a bit about this road being built, but the coverage seemed quite open-ended and somewhat vague, so people were talking about how the road might be extended, it might start again, but no one could really say where it was, when it was going to get started again, how far it was going to be built. And most importantly to us, no one seemed to have an answer for why, apparently, these communities wanted a road. So this was really the gap in the conversation that we wanted to fill, because we felt like if you don't know the cause of a problem, there's no way you'll ever come to a solution for the problem. And so over the course of the next 40 days, we travelled through the Manu Biosphere Reserve, where we stayed with 4 different Indigenous communities to interview them about what they hoped and feared and dreamed that this road would bring. We visited Shintuya, a native community who have had road access for 50 years. We visited Shipitieri, who have had road access for 3 years, but they're actually based on the other side of a river to the road. And we then visited Diamante, who have no road access and who are most fervently campaigning for this road to be built. So despite having worked in Manu for quite a few years, none of us really knew what to expect on this expedition. The road had been a hugely polarising issue for a number of years, and the main reason that it hadn't been built was really the environmental argument. And on the surface, our team as biologists or conservation filmmakers or even just Westerners are fairly representative of that cause, whether or not we like it. The road's also facilitating an increase in illegal activities, and by all intents and purposes, the people that we were interviewing may be involved in these activities, so we didn't really know, with both of these things combined, whether people would be willing to talk to us, and if they did, whether they would be open and honest with us. So we decided not to film for the first few days of our expedition in each community, despite really not having that much time there in the first place. We also took quite a small camera to be as unobtrusive as possible, and yeah, just tried to sort of integrate as much as we could before asking people if we could interview them or even getting our camera out. But in reality, finding people who were willing to talk to us actually wasn't a problem, and in the end we were filming from day one in every community from morning to night, before then going back to where we were sleeping, desperately trying to charge our batteries with any solar power we could have gained during the day, and then obsessively backing up our hard drives. And it was an amazing but very intense experience of just spending every waking moment together, going to interview, thinking on the spot, translating, asking the right questions, or at least trying to, and then sleeping next to each other for 40 days. But to be honest, we were just absolutely amazed and overwhelmed with the generosity and hospitality that we received in every single location, household that we visited. And more than anything, we were just overwhelmed with how generous people were with the knowledge and information that they were sharing with us, and how open they were with us, people who they were just meeting for the first time. And it was just the most amazing privilege for us to be able to learn about the hopes and dreams and fears of people who live in this incredible place. But as the sort of details of the situation unfolded in front of us, this also became the most difficult part of the whole experience. We started to realise that people in Manu feel completely ignored and forgotten by the state. And this was an opportunity for them to have their voices heard, maybe for the first time. People in Manu want help, they want support, and they desperately want change.
También son seres humanos que necesitan vivir, que necesitan cambiar. Seres humanos que necesitan tener una calidad de vida. Y eso es lo que pedimos, calidad de vida.
No hay trabajo acá. Es desesperante para los comuneros. Te falta el jabón, te falta el azúcar, te faltan los lápices, los cogemos para los niños. No hay ni agua, no hay ni luz. Estamos abandonados.
So in spite of our fears that we'd have no one to talk to, by the end of our short spell in Manu, we actually had managed to interview over 50 people from Indigenous communities on film. And from these conversations, we started to get a picture of what life in a rainforest community really looked like. So if we look at Diamante, for example, the community who have no road access, they feel completely cut off and ignored by the state. They feel like their voices aren't being heard and that they aren't having their basic human needs met. So in Diamante there's no running water, there's very poor healthcare. If you get sick at night, there's no way of being evacuated because it's too dangerous to leave on the boat at night with the shallow and fast-moving river that's alongside the community. It's also a day's journey to the nearest hospital. There are quite few job opportunities and the majority of people really are living sort of hand to mouth. The quality of education is also very poor. There are no Indigenous teachers. All the teaching is done in Spanish instead of the native language, and there's no electricity, no phone signal, and no internet. So overall, people in Diamante are desperate to improve their living standards, and this road has become a symbol of hope. So once we'd gained a better understanding of what life was like without a road, we were interested to find out what life was like for a nearby community who had had a road for 50 years. And so we travelled from Diamante Native Community just a couple of miles upriver to Shintuya, who have had a road for 50 years. Yeah. And sadly what we found was heartbreaking. People in Shintuya were still struggling with many of the same problems as those living in Diamante. They still had very little access to secure jobs and had to rely on logging the rainforest. Living conditions were very similar, with limited access to good sanitation, good quality education and decent healthcare. There is still no phone signal or internet, and there is running water, but this isn't clean as it comes directly from the river. We also met a hugely inspiring woman in Shintuya called Victoria, who told us that not only had life not improved in the 50 years that they'd had a road, but actually a lot of issues had gotten much, much worse.
Que ha pasado hace más de 50 años la carretera y no vemos un buen beneficio.
Bueno, para hablar de necesidades tenemos todavía bastante que mejorar, ¿no? Porque una de las primeras necesidades es tener la energía de las 24 horas. En caso de emergencia, sí, no hay mucho apoyo. Es muy caro, muy difícil para poder viajar, para poder salir de acá, ¿no?
Mira mi carretera, ¿cómo está mi comunidad? ¿Tiene edificios? ¿Cómo estamos? Hace 20 años, 30 años, mejor era todavía, más organizado, más bonito vivíamos.
So since the road was built, people from the outside, known locally as colonists, had descended to Manu to log the rainforest. They'd taken land from Shintuya, and the community had faced ongoing discrimination and racial abuse. Victoria told us that at this point, many people within the community were ashamed to call themselves Indigenous, and that their language and cultural heritage was on the brink of being lost. So it was pretty devastating for us to learn this, knowing that the fate that Shintuya had faced was likely to also come to Diamante if the road was built. And then on the 18th of November 2018, everything changed as the regional government supposedly got approval from the central government to start building this road. And so what had until now been a hypothetical road with hypothetical threats actually became very, very real. We had the opportunity to go to the road on the first day of construction with Diamante Native community. And through this experience, we got to see firsthand what happens when you open a rainforest up to the outside world. So as we travelled along the road, we just saw logging trail after logging trail after logging trail, stacks of timber piled up and just trucks everywhere. And there was no real need to hide what was going on because there's obviously no police presence. It was an absolute free-for-all. And then when we pulled up to the sort of end of this lollipop of a road, we saw the most bizarre sight. Caterpillars covered in balloons, a regional government flag flying, pop music blaring, and drinks being handed around. So this was a construction party, and clearly the government had something to celebrate. Soon, the regional governor arrived in a fleet of 4x4s and proceeded to open this road to an audience of around 100 local people. He promised them a better life and spoke of greedy and hypocritical environmentalists who wanted to protect the land over the lives and futures of Indigenous people. But there was a very sinister and manipulative undertone to his whole speech, and he continually undermined the value of Indigenous culture and traditional ways of life, whilst promoting a better, more modern future. He explained that he knew that there was gas alongside where the road was being built, and that this gas should be exploited. And I should explain that it's actually illegal in Peru to build a road with the intention of exploring for gas. But this whole project's been skirting the fringes of legality from the very beginning. So yes, they have been given permission to build this road, but we found out that actually what they've been given permission for are improvements to a neighbourhood trail, so basically a connecting path between communities. What's in fact being built is an 11-metre wide highway, and to put that into perspective, that's the same width as a UK dual carriageway. So environmental approval has been given, but this has been given to an entirely different project. And it was very clear from the regional governor's speech that this road was being built for resource extraction. So when we interviewed politicians, it also became very clear that there were no plans in place to actually protect communities from the negative impacts of this road, and nor were there any projects in place to deliver on the promises being made, either socially or economically. But I'd like to emphasise that the hopes and dreams that people in Manu have are entirely legitimate. So it's very human to desire better healthcare, better education, even a mobile phone. It's very human to want adventure and improvement and progress. But politicians are using these very human desires to sell a road that's unfortunately very unlikely to actually benefit local people. And this is because people have never really been at the heart of this project. And it's this type of power imbalance that was why we wanted to go to Manu and try to give a platform to the voice of the people living there in our film, which I'm happy to say is now finished. So the final film's called Voices on the Road, and over the last couple of years It's been screened in Peru, South America more generally, the UK, Europe, North America and Asia, and it's now available to watch online. We're also now working with one of our teammates who's Peruvian and who's based in Peru to work on an impact campaign which explores some of the themes and issues brought up in the film with local communities. Unfortunately, at the minute, like lots of projects, this is on hold, or we're having to adjust our plans due to COVID. But yeah, we're hopefully going to be able to return to Manu in 2021 to carry out this impact campaign, and if we don't, we'll have to think of an alternative. But thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this interesting. For those of you who are joining the event live, I look forward to answering any questions you have, and for anyone who's catching up later, you can find out more at voicesontheroadfilm.com. Please feel free to get in touch with any questions that you've got, either tonight or at any point in the future. Thank you so much for listening.